books, Islamic books, Quran translation, and brochures and pamphlets about Islam to introducing Islam to the non-Muslims. And we will share our promotional video, and we will give you detailed information in this video. Unfortunately, the video is only in Turkish sound, and we have subtitles in Arabic language. As soon as possible, inshallah, we will try to complete the English version of this video. And today, Ustaz Yusuf Ismail will give today our webinar, and I will introduce him to you. I will give you a little bit information about Ustaz Yusuf Ismail. He is the public speaker and debater for the Islamic Propagation Center. Is international from South Africa, and attorney by profession, specializing in criminal law. Involved debates with Christian scholars, preachers, and ministers for the past 15 years. Hosted a television program in South Africa for 2 years. Engaged in discussions and relevance of religion in 21st century society, authenticity of religious scriptures, development of the Bible and contemporaries, and political issues affecting communities throughout. Now we can watch our promotional video. After that, we will give the words to Ustaz Yusuf Ismail, and we will complete like this, inshallah.
Sosyal Eğitim ve Kültür Derneği olarak 2017 yılında İstanbul'da faaliyetlerimize başladık. Dünyanın çeşitli yerlerinde İslami kaynak ve kitapların ücretsiz olarak basılıp dağıtılması, özellikle yüce kitabımız Kur'an-ı Kerim'in çeşitli dillere tercümesi ve dağıtımı alanlarında faaliyet göstermekteyiz. Şekilde turist ziyareti almakta olan ülkemize gelen yabancı misafirlerimize temas edip ilahi mesajın doğru şekilde ulaştırılmasını hedefliyoruz. Ayrıca uluslararası alanda ilişki içerisinde olduğumuz sosyal paydaşlarımızla birlikte yeni Müslüman olmuş kardeşlerimizin temel dini eğitimlerini alabilmeleri ve dinlerini hakkıyla öğrenebilmeleri için de eğitim ve kamp programları planlamaktayız. Olarak kendimize İslam medeniyeti, toplum yapısı ve kültürünü ülkemize gelen yabancı misafirlerimize en doğru şekilde anlatmayı ve uygun iletişim ortamının oluşmasını sağlamayı, Kur'an-ı Kerim ve diğer İslami eserlerin yerel ve küresel anlamda farklı dillere çevrilmesi, basımı ve ücretsiz şekilde dağıtımı faaliyetlerini gerçekleştirmeyi, ve tebliğ çalışmalarının sağlıklı bir zeminde yürütebilmesi için gerek özel, gerekse de tüzel kişilerle iletişim ve işbirliği içinde olup en uygun ortamı oluşturmak için çalışmayı kendimize bir yol ve görev edinmiş bulunuyoruz. Yüce ve kutsi hedeflere ulaşma yolunda Rabbimizden gönderilen bu ilahi vahyi duymayan bir kişinin bile kalmaması, gece ve gündüzün ulaştığı her yere İslam'ın mesajının doğru şekilde ulaşması için var gücümüzle çalışıyoruz. Batılı toplumların mensuplarında özellikle medya kanallarının yoğun kara propagandası sonucunda oluşan İslam ve Müslümanlar hakkındaki olumsuz algıları tamamen yıkıp tüm insanlık için en güzel örnek olan son Nebi Muhammed sallallahu aleyhi ve sellemi ve onun tüm insanlığa getirdiği hak dini tanıtmak için bizi başarıya ulaştırması konusunda Yüce Rabbimizden yardım diliyoruz. derneğimizin genel merkezine gelerek, sosyal medya hesaplarımızı takip ederek ya da www.hidayetvey.com adresinden web sayfamızı ziyaret ederek faaliyetlerimiz hakkında daha fazla bilgi edinebilirsiniz. Hidayet Sosyal Eğitim ve Kültür Derneği. Gayret bizden, tevfik ve hidayet Allah'tan, Allah'tan, Allah'tan.
Yeah, this was our promotional video, a short video. It's giving our general information about our association, what are we doing, and what our mission and vision. And today, inshallah, we will talk about COVID-19 and Muslim response. As you know, we have in the whole world we have this problem, and we cannot going outside from the home, and everything is going online, and our activities we are so that we start the online activities. And now I will give the word Ustaz Yusuf Ismail, inshallah. He will talk to us about that issue. Yeah, Ustaz.
Jazakallah khair, and it's good to be back. Well, I think with Fatih Oskan on the last occasion, I think I'm meeting you for the first time and your organization. I do apologize. I do have a slight cold. It's and a bit of a post-nasal drip, and I can assure you it's not coronavirus. It's just an allergy that I have. So if I've got a bit of a sniffle, just forgive me. But it's the environment and the climate that I'm in. So let me start off by saying Alhamdulillah. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العظيم. Now I want to start off by sharing a screen. This is a PowerPoint I in fact did today, and this basically whether the screen, you see the screen, I'm going to basically expand it. I'm going to expand the screen and commence a slideshow from the beginning. Let me know if you can see this. Is this clear? Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see now.
You can see the whole. Is it fully? So basically, this is a PowerPoint that I've presented, and I'm going to basically discuss today, and this is something that I've suggested. It's our organization that you're involved in. But right now, what you've rightfully pointed out is that you have a strange situation, as Edward Snowden, the journalist who is now fugitive in Russia, pointed out, a strange situation for the first time in human history, where the entire world is under what we would call a global lockdown. We've never seen this before. We've had pandemics and plagues in history. We've never seen a situation where the entire world has been shut down and the economies of the countries has been devastated to the level that you see today. And of course, the repercussions that's going to happen over the coming few months and of course years, depending if the lockdown is ever lifted or not. Now, we've got a situation where we are surrounded by a great degree of negativity. I don't know what the news reports state in Turkey, but certainly in South Africa and indeed in other parts of the world, we are surrounded by so-called conventional medical experts formed on behalf of the government, giving the mind with all sorts of negativity to the extent that we're dealing with a pandemic of excessively severe proportions, to the extent that you have a situation that people are going to die in large numbers, to the extent that the only solution is this global fascist and Orwellian lockdown that you see in different parts of the world. And what is surprising is that some Muslims have justified this and supported the position of governments on the basis that they are appealing to certain prophetic traditions and paradigms. You know, the Prophet ﷺ spoke about engaging in some form of quarantine or staying away from a city which is infected with a form of a plague of some sort. And there are many hadiths on that point. But one thing we need to point out, and we'll go to it closer to the end, is that the prophetic paradigm, the Quran, and indeed the Sunnah, nowhere gives any form of precedent. And let me repeat this, nowhere is there any historical precedent in the Islamic worldview equivalent to the type of lockdowns that you see imposed by governments in the world today? We don't have a historical precedent because that's not how Islam dealt with crisis of this particular nature. Islam dealt with it rationally. Islam took a moderate approach, and Islam took a balanced approach in terms of what it confronted over history during the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, during the time of the Umayyads, during the time of the Abbasid Empire, and certainly even in Europe, you've got a rich legacy, the history of Ottomans. You have a rational, moderate response to everything. And I think one of the things we need to be calling upon is moderation. Moderation in deed, moderation in action, moderation in virtue. This is basically the deen of Islam. Islam is viewed as a middle way. We do not take extreme measures. You know, the Quran says, Ya Ahl al-Kitab, La taghlu fi dinikum. Do not go to extremes in your ways of life, in your deen. La taghlu fi dinikum. Do not go to extremes. And what you see is a form of extremism by governments throughout the world, where they're imposing these kind of fascist regulations in terms of which you see society being shut down and, in fact, having a situation where the military deployed against populations with guns pointing at them to ensure that they don't remove their houses. So, what I want to do in this short presentation, inshallah, is that a Muslim never loses hope. A Muslim never loses hope whatsoever, regardless of the situation. Islam presents an optimistic view to society. We don't present pessimism. And when we look at the facts and look at some of the data that has been presented, inshallah, this will give us some degree, God willing, for those non Muslims out there, God willing, will give us some degree of hope that all is not lost and that we, in fact, face a far better opportunity in terms of exposing what is going on and certainly using this as a means in terms of liberating society and humanity at large. So let's get started. What are we dealing with? Now, brother, just tell me, you see this picture that's on the wall, that's being shared on the screen, I beg your pardon, on my computer screen. This is a picture of diplomats and individuals. This was an event that took place in October 2019. Now, hear this, October 2019, 3 months or 2 months prior to the outbreak of a coronavirus pandemic. This event or this particular meeting is widely described as Event 201. Now, what is Event 201? Never heard of it. Event 201 was a get together in October 2019. And those listeners out there, you can check this on YouTube. You had a situation where various organizations like the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, they partnered with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in October 18th, 2019, October 18, 2019, in New York. And this was what we would call a simulation, a high-level pandemic exercise. And this exercise illustrated areas where public-private partnerships will be necessary during a response to a severe pandemic in order to diminish large-scale economic and societal consequences. So in other words, it was like what we would call a training exercise, a simulation. So what happens is that people meet together and they pretend, they enact a particular exercise that they are now facing a pandemic. But this was not just any pandemic. This was quite strangely a coronavirus pandemic. Now, the question I need to ask myself is that what is and you can check this up on YouTube. You go to YouTube and you just simply type in the YouTube search channel, Event 201, and this will bring you up videos on this particular event. You can check up the highlights reels package, which essentially shows you that there was a simulation of a coronavirus pandemic 3 months before the pandemic actually happened. Now, this is quite remarkable, and people are saying, well, look, maybe it's a conspiracy. Well, I don't know what the background is behind this, but it's quite strange that in this pandemic exercise, 3 months before a pandemic actually happened, and you check this up on YouTube, they actually propose measures to impose in terms of what to do when a coronavirus pandemic happens. And they enact this in the simulation. The pandemic begins in South America. It starts from pigs that spreads a virus. It then moves to China, and then globally, in this pandemic, 65 million people die. And one of the solutions they propose is lockdown, global lockdown, vaccinations, shutting down of alternative information and news reports which question what is basically happening. And the question we need to ask is what is how is this coincidental that 3 months before an actual pandemic you have a simulation? Simulation is an enaction, an enacted. Those in Turkey who do not speak English too well, simulation is an enaction or something enacting, make pretense of a particular event, and you play out what you do, what actions you will take, what steps you will engage in, and of course the trajectory that you would basically follow. So this is what happened in October 2019. And this is a quotation from Event 201, where they state that in recent years, the world has seen a growing number of epidemic events amounting to approximately 200 events annually. These events are increasing, they're disruptive to health, economies, societies. Experts agree that it's only a matter of time before one of these epidemics become global, a pandemic with potentially catastrophic consequences, a severe pandemic which becomes Event 201, which would require reliable cooperation among several industries, national governments, and key international institutions. So, what you're doing is that this is something which we would call, um, I don't know if we can call it a predictive programming event. Predictive programming is where you basically have an event of this particular nature. You have a situation where you enact a pandemic, and strangely enough, 3 months down the line, you have a pandemic happening. It's like this: we're preparing the day before for bomb blast to take place. God forbid, Allah forbid. And the next day, there's a bomb blast that happens. Now, obviously, the question would arise is that how can you prepare for something before the event actually happens, unless you had foreknowledge about an event that is about to happen? And this has led to a wide degree of speculation about biological warfare, about this entire incident, about what we see globally being planned, and so on and so forth. But this begs the question we need to perhaps look and unpack and see and ascertain what Event 201 is. So, for those viewers out there among in Turkey, if those of you, if the YouTube is available in Turkey and there's no restrictions placed on YouTube as you have in China and North Korea, type in on YouTube Event 201 and you will be gobsmacked at an event. And in fact, the date where this event takes place in October 2019, 3 months before global pandemic. Maybe this is something that the mainstream media and maybe Turkish media should cover. Event 201. Now, moving on to that, we then had a situation of a pandemic happening in December 2019. And the question we need to ask is that, people talk about coronavirus, as if this is something new. But in actual fact, coronaviruses have been around for time immemorial. If you have a common cold, if you have a common cold, in most instances, that could be viewed as a coronavirus. Coronaviruses, this is a common explanation. I don't want to bog you with a lot of information, but they are a group of related, what they described as RNA viruses. I think it's I don't know the technical term, but RNA viruses that cause infections in mammals and birds. They could be included in the form of mild illnesses such as the common cold, and the more lethal varieties such as SARS, which we saw in 2002, 2003, MERS in 2011 in the Middle East, uh, and of course what is now described the catch term COVID-19, which is a term applied, an appellation to what we see before us. And of course the symptoms in species vary. They could cause upper respiratory tract disease, and importantly, there are no vaccines or antiviral drugs to prevent or treat human coronavirus infections. And I note that coronaviruses have been around since the 1960s. So what does it tell you? That since the 1960s, there are no vaccines to treat this. People just get sick and then they, of course, recover naturally. So now there's talk about vaccination, vaccination, vaccination, but there's been no vaccines for coronaviruses in general since the 1960s. So if they come up with what can be called a vaccine, I would be extremely cautious in taking these vaccines because we don't know what the composition of these vaccines in fact entail. Bearing in mind that there have been no vaccines for coronaviruses since the 1960s, we need to be cautious in terms of what we are told at this particular juncture in time. Human coronaviruses were discovered in the 1960s. I've given you the names: E.C. Kendall, Malcolm Bion, David Tyrrell. And they isolated it from a boy in the common cold virus in B814, that's what it's called. The virus was not able to be cultivated using the standard techniques. And that's basically what we have had since. The coronavirus disease of 2019, the official explanation is that it's an infectious disease caused by a severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, what is called SARS-CoV-2. And COVID-19 is the name that we all are basically used to being drummed in the media. And the story goes is that it was first identified in December 2019 in Wuhan, China, in a meat market. And the story goes that one person had it, he ate a bat, or there was a middleman or a middle factor in relation to how transmission happened to one person. And as a result of that one person, accordingly, we are told that as of 10th of May 2020, more than 4.2 million cases have been reported across 187 countries and territories, resulting in more than 279,000 deaths. And at this particular point in time, more than 1.37 million people have in fact recovered. Now, this is the official version of events. Someone either ate a bat or a bat had it, it spread to one person, and somehow you created a global pandemic. Now, if that is a story as ludicrous as you can get, that one person eating a bat or possibly having a middle factor, or what we would say a missing link, linking up to human infection, causing a global pandemic, if that is as bizarre as you can get, and if that is not a conspiracy, then you tell me what else is not a conspiracy. There is in Wuhan, this is basically the meat market. You can see the picture. This is the meat market, or the what they call this, the live meat market, or the fresh market, where live animals are basically sold. And we are told that the origins come from here. Not surprising, notwithstanding the fact that nearby you've got what is called the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that has been known for more than a decade to experiment on viruses in a laboratory. It's more likely to get a virus outbreak of this particular magnitude from a laboratory, as opposed to simply getting it from a meat market or a fresh market or a wet market. That's what they call wet market in Wuhan, because wet market means by chance someone picks it up, one person picks it up, and then it spreads, and then you've got millions of people infected. So this is how it goes. That on the 31st of December 2019, you've got the health authorities in China. They reported to the World Health Organization certain pneumonia cases in the Hubei province, Wuhan. And then an investigation was declared. And then on the 30th of January, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak public health emergency of international concern. And at that point in time, there were about 7,818 cases that were globally confirmed, affecting 19 countries in 5 World Health Organization regions. Now, the early cases, according to the established reports, mostly had links to the Huanan seafood wholesale market. That's this market here. And the virus is thought, still nobody knows, to have a zoonotic origin, meaning coming from animals. And this obviously was scientific consensus, seems to be what governments have been told, that COVID-19 had a natural origin. This is the so-called official version of events, that this is a natural occurring origin. But now the question we are asked to believe that one person came in contact with a bat or an animal, and that animal somehow or the other had a virus which jumped cross species from an animal to a human, one man, and that man infected a few people in a small region. And then globally, you have this massive pandemic. I mean, I find that difficult to accept, and I find it difficult to believe in the way, in fact, it is put. Scientifically, it hasn't been proven, and this is just simply a theory. And you can call this a conspiracy theory, where a person ate a bat or came into contact with a bat, and somehow or the other it spread around the world. So this is a market, and the earliest known person to have had symptoms was said to have fallen ill on the 1st of December 2019. But that person didn't have any connection to this market. He never came into contact with the market, strangely enough. And then on the 13th of March 2020, there was a report from the South China Morning Post which suggested a case which traced back to the 17th of November 2019, where a 55-year-old from Hubei, that's Hubei province, may have been the first person infected. So I'm saying that the data doesn't basically give us a clear and specific outcome in terms of how, when, where, why, and exactly the beginning of what basically happened. We do know, however, that earlier on, I think in October or November, there were the Wuhan military games in which the United States were involved in, and you had a large number of US armed forces in Wuhan, in China, at that particular time, in that specific area. We don't know if anything happened at that juncture, whether any virus, either man made or natural, was said to have occurred during that specific period. So there are theories at this point in time, and all we can look at is the circumstantial information and the circumstantial evidence, and people are free to draw their own conclusions. I haven't drawn my own conclusions because I don't have, besides circumstantial evidence, I don't have exact data and information, and I think that's how Muslims should operate. Look at the facts, raise questions, and don't necessarily take everything that your government tells you at face value, because more often than not you have a situation where your governments and governments in the world, I'm in South Africa, I'm free to criticize the government, I don't know about Turkey, but we have had a situation where our government has lied to us and now has imposed military and martial law, where if we go to on the beach alone, not with group of people but alone, you can be arrested. If you walk your dog on the street, you can be arrested. If you go to the masajid, people have been arrested just going to the masjid. I don't know about Turkey, but even if one person or two people go to a masjid, not a group, they will arrest you. If you congregate and want to have a protest against some unjust laws being passed by government, they will arrest you. If you walk on your road with no good reason, they will arrest you. If you travel, as I have traveled, I'm an attorney by profession and I can obviously get away with it. But if you travel and they find that you have no reason to travel, they can arrest you. And what's the reason for the arrest? Well, the reason they give is that they are trying to protect people and protect you. Have I lost connection, brothers? Fatih, is everybody there? Fatih, can you hear me? Is everybody there? I seem to have lost connection. Let me try and get my connection back and up and running. All right, I've got your notice. You can, let me get back to my resume my slideshows. So basically, coming back to what I'm saying, at least I've got the indication that you are there, Fatih. I'm saying that the South African position for Muslims, and indeed my internet connection is unstable, but I just want to point out that for South Africa, situation is extremely dire because you've got military rule and martial law imposed by our government. This is another individual that I want to bring my attention to. His name is Li Wenliang. Now, he was one of the first individuals that apparently did an exposure of what was happening in China. And strangely enough, in February, strangely enough, this man died. He was a Chinese doctor. He became a hero for raising the alarm that there was an epidemic of some sort in China. There was an outpouring of grief um, after earlier reports that is everybody there? I see there's some sort of interference in the background. But can you hear me? Is everybody? Okay, I'm going to continue, and if there's any interruption, let me know what happened. What happened is that this individual shot to fame in December 2030 when he warned fellow medics of strange cases of pneumonia. And he spoke about what they would call a Wuhan SARS hashtag, and the Chinese authorities accused him of rumor mongering, and they had him arrested and charged. And unfortunately, what transpired is that this individual subsequently died. This is a man, he died, and apparently he had some information in terms of the virus. Nobody knows what information he had and what he would share, but we will never know because the man was then subsequently killed. Now we have something which is even more odd. We've got an organization called the World Health Organization, which apparently gives us information on pandemics and outbreaks and so on. But as late as, look at the screenshot, 14th of January 2020, they were giving information, according to, based on the Chinese authorities, that they found no clear evidence of human to human transmission of the novel coronavirus. Now that's quite odd, because I remember reading the news articles in January 2020. As late as January 2020, people were talking about possible human to human transmission. But here you've got a World Health Organization, which is now, if there is a virus, negligently and recklessly tells people that there's no evidence of human to human transmission of the virus. And so people can go on as normal, and only as late as 30th January, you have a situation where they backtrack and say that there may be an epidemic. Now, I want to bring for your attention that the individual behind the World Health Organization, Muslims need to be aware of this, because more often than not, we are not aware of this. Is this man here, seen with the Chinese Prime Minister, a man by the name of Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. Now, prior to being joining the World Health Organization, Tedros was the health minister in Ethiopia. He's not a medical expert. He's got absolutely no background in medical health, absolutely nothing. He's not a physician, but he was involved in some capacity as a minister in Ethiopia. And during his reign in Ethiopia, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, your viewers can check this up on YouTube and even on Google, check up the online newspapers. He was said to have lied on 3 occasions about a cholera outbreak that took place in Ethiopia. Millions of people died. Hundreds of thousands of people died as a result of the cholera outbreak. And Tedros, the man who is presently running the World Health Organization, lied dismally about a cholera outbreak in his own country. And today he is the advisor on global health. And this is a man running an organization who in January 2020, on the 14th of January, was busy telling people that Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human to human transmission of the novel virus. Now, how credible is this organization? How credible is this particular organization? And how authentic are they? Because they are now advising governments throughout the world, and governments are viewing them as a credible source of information. And this is a man that is running the organization, seen here with the Chinese prime minister, and now solely seeking funding from the Chinese, since Trump has since withdrawn any form of funding from the World Health Organization. And here, seeing Ethiopian people accusing him of lying of a cholera outbreak because he deliberately deceived the population. Here's the point. What Muslims need to do is we need to empower ourselves with facts. I've got a copy of the Quran here. Get yourself a copy of this book. This is a study Quran, which can be available. You can purchase it by Amazon. It's in English, but excellent resource material with material translation, text translation, and comprehensive commentary by a series of writers. And what you study in it, when you study, we are told as Muslims that we are to always ask, we are always seek knowledge. We are always to make dua that Allah gives us knowledge and increases our knowledge. Because with knowledge, we can become empowered. Without knowledge, we just simply become lemmings for the establishment, for government, for communities, for leaders who tell us what to do and can keep us shut down behind closed doors, where your immune system is weakened as opposed to being out in the sunshine with nature itself, where you can strengthen yourself. We need to empower ourselves with information. Here's the information. According to the data from the best studied countries and regions, the lethality of COVID-19 is on average about 0.2%. 0.2%, which is very low, which is in the range of a very severe influenza flu outbreak, or about 20 times lower than was originally assumed by the World Health Organization. And even in the global hotspots, for example, you had cases of Italy or now United States, a country which has 375 million people. The risk of death for the general population of scale of the elderly population and the working age, the risk of death is exceptionally low. It's typically in the range of a daily car ride to work. When you go for a car ride to work, you take your car and you go to work. What's the death rate? Well, you can have a chance of basically meeting up in an accident. There's a greater chance of you meeting up in an accident. And then, of course, basically contracting or dying of a coronavirus. You can contract it, but you may not die. According to medical experts, up to 80% of all test positive persons, they remain symptom free. And even among 70 to 79-year-olds, only about 60% remain symptom free, meaning they show no symptoms. And about 95% of all persons show mild symptoms at most. So this virus, if it exists or it hasn't yet been isolated, let me point this out, it hasn't been isolated. And when they test the virus, they test for genetic material based on what was picked up from lung fluid in China, and they patented a particular test called the RT-PCR test. That test tests for genetic material in the individual. So theoretically, if you've got the common flu, or you may have lung cancer, you could theoretically register positive, even though you don't have the so-called dreaded disease COVID-19, which could possibly explain why such a large number of individuals are testing positive. But as much as they are saying that there's a large number of approximately, I think the earlier figures, 2 million or so, that have test positive, the vast majority remain symptom free. So I think we as Muslims need to look at things positively. It is haram and wrong to see things negatively. And only by knowing facts and figures and information can we basically unclog our minds, which have become poisoned by mainstream media, poisoned by what government tells us, poisoned by groups and institutes like the World Health Organization and other movements. And we need to basically empower ourselves with information in order to liberate our minds and, of course, liberate those around us in society. So the important point is that 95% of all persons show mild symptoms at most. This is commonly known, and this is what every single medical expert will tell you. Up to 1/3 of all persons already have a certain amount of background immunity to COVID-19 because they've had previous contact with other coronaviruses, like the common cold virus. The common cold virus, I've got a common cold, I may have a coronavirus, in a general sense, not just necessarily the specific COVID-19. The average age of the deceased in most countries, those who die, including Italy, is over 80 years old, 79, 75, above 80. And only about 1% of the deceased have no serious preconditions, meaning, and this is important to note, people talk about Italy and all these people dying. Almost all of them, 99% of the people who die have got preconditions, meaning they've got other ailments, they've got TB, they've got severe lung cancer, they've got respiratory disorders. So the age and the relative profile of the deaths essentially corresponds to normal mortality. And in most Western countries, about 50 to 70% of all extra deaths occur in nursing homes, which don't obviously benefit from a general lockdown. Up to 50%, importantly, of all additional deaths have not been caused by COVID-19, but by the consequences of the lockdown, by panic, by fear. The treatment of heart attacks and strokes have decreased, so to speak, by up to 60%. How is it possible? Not that heart attacks and strokes have gone away, but because many people are no longer going to the hospital for severe illnesses and severe ailments because they are fearful of this COVID-19. That's why you see a lot of hospitals empty. You've got a heart attack, you've got strokes, you've got other illnesses, you've got people that need to be operated for hiatal hernias and so on. They can't go for operations because they are told of this fearful ailment of COVID-19, where the mortality rate is exceptionally low. And a lot of the people who are dying have got other preconditions. So people with severe illnesses are not being treated at hospitals. I don't know what the position in Turkey is, but in South Africa, you see this all the time. There are hospitals off limits. I had a client, I'm an attorney by profession. I had a client who had a heart attack. He was taken to a local hospital called the Entabeni Hospital in Durban. He died in casualty. What happened? He was diagnosed as dying of COVID-19, even though, according to the family, no test was conducted. So the question we need to ask is, what is the rationale behind putting up these figures of COVID-19? And now you see quite strangely the case and the situation. The person dies with COVID-19. That means if we question them, it means they didn't die of COVID-19, they die with COVID-19. But this doesn't make sense. If you die in a car accident and you have the flu or the cold, do they tell you you died with the flu, or you died with the cold, or you died of lung cancer, or you died with lung cancer, although you died of the accident, or you died with arthritis in the event that you die in a motor vehicle accident? So it doesn't actually make sense. And what's happening is that because of this fear, we are affecting people who need urgent medical treatment on a whole host of ailments. In South Africa in 2018, 63,000 people died of tuberculosis, TB, which is infectious. 63,000 people died in South Africa of TB. Our HIV/AIDS death rate is exceptionally high. Nobody shut down the economy. Right now in South Africa, we've got 183 people that died of this so-called COVID-19. We don't know how many have got preconditions because the government is silent. You've got a criminal government called the ANC. They are silent in terms of the actual preconditions of these people. And there's about 180 somewhat deaths, and they've shut down the entire economy. We're now on level 4. There's 5 different levels. Level 5, severe. Level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1. Only once all the levels go away, basically, we have a situation where possibly they may uplift it. So for 43 days, we've got the military, we've got the armed forces with guns pointed at the population, keeping us behind, not allowing us to go to mosque, even in small numbers, not allowing us to walk anywhere, not allowing us to go individually on a beach. I need to live near a beach. I tend to break this rule all the time. And you've got people who are just arrested for being standing. You've got police shooting the poor in the townships. You've got people who have their houses being entered into by the armed forces, by soldiers, and they're being killed for engaging in actions which are viewed as against the regulation. So what we see here is global fascism of the highest order. And we need to be standing out against it as Muslims because Islam is always for liberation. Look at Surah 4, verse 75. Now, I'll give you another example going on with the issue of the mainstream media and government. Several media were caught trying to dramatize the situation in hospitals, sometimes even with manipulative images and videos. I mean, in general, there's been a degree of unprofessional reporting of many in the media, and they've maximized the panic. They create panic. You know, Islam teaches you not to create panic in the population, not to create fear. We need to uplift people, not to create fear and fear mongering. It's wrong and haram to create fear mongering. I'll give you one example. CBS News, they posted footage of this. You've seen this? Coronavirus, America's epicenter. New York now accounts for more than half of new US cases. And this was a picture of a hospital which was supposedly to be shown to be in New York. It later was exposed that this hospital, which was shown on CBS this morning, was actually a hospital which was from Lombardy in Italy, I believe. This hospital was in Italy, not in New York. And so CBS News has now admitted that the footage of the ward using during a report on the coronavirus was actually shot in Italy. It was in Bergamo, Lombardy, this area in Italy, where there was a large degree of essential people who were said to have basically contracted the virus, and CBS was shown to have lied. Now, why would the media lie? Why? Unless there is an agenda. Countries without curfews and bans, as an example, such as Japan, South Korea, Sweden, why is it that they have experienced a far more negative course of events in other countries? Sweden was even praised, strange enough, by the World Health Organization, and now has a higher immunity rate compared to countries with lockdown. Sweden has no lockdown. South Korea has ended. Taiwan had no lockdown. Taiwan just simply engaged in safe practice. There was no lockdown, and the amount of infection in Taiwan is zero, absolutely zero, which is closer to China. So how come a country like Timbuktu or South Africa or United States, which is far removed from China, can have such a high infection rate and purported mortality rate, but a country like Sweden, which is very low, and Taiwan, which has now close to zero, how is it possible that they were able to do this without any lockdown? It goes to show that the lockdown is unjustifiable scientifically. There was also a fear in terms of the shortage of ventilators, which were unjustified. According to many lung specialists, the ventilation where they intubate you, they put these pipes down your throat. It's partly done out of fear of spreading the virus, but a lot of people are dying as a result of intubation. Various studies by medical experts have shown that there's no evidence of the virus spreading from aerosols or through smear infection. There is no also scientific effectiveness for the face masks which are being used in asymptomatic individuals. I mean, a lot of experts warn that masks can in fact be germ carriers, because if you got a mask, and we are mandated to wear a mask, I go to court, but I take out my mask, I put it on the floor, or I put it on the table. What happens? Germs accumulate. And then I put it in the car, and then I carry it with my hand, and then I put it on my face again, and I cough, and then I breathe in carbon dioxide when I close my mouth. What happens? You're breathing in germs all the time. So, outside the ambit of a theater, face masks don't necessarily have a particular assistance. What does assist you is what Islam has told us all along: hygiene. Obviously, controlling those who are immunocompromised, keeping them safe, not exposing them to harm. But the rest of society who have strong immune systems, the young, the youth, need to go out in the open. Of course, you can maintain social distancing. I have no problem with that. Don't have massive meetings or gatherings. Maintain safe space. But to keep you shut down in small flats or houses is actually going to weaken your immune system. And so leading doctors have not surprisingly called this hype absolutely ridiculous. It's been shown also that the virus test kits have been prone to errors, as I pointed out. The official virus was not clinically validated due to time pressure, and some may obviously may react to other coronaviruses. There were talks about the test kits being infected in England. There were news reports, and several medical experts have also described that the so-called push to get vaccines against coronaviruses as totally dangerous. I mean, the vaccine against the so-called swine flu in 2009, in many instances, led to severe neurological damage, and in fact resulted in lawsuits in minors that were basically affected. So we need to basically look at the facts. We need to look at what medical experts are telling us, and stay away from what our governments tell us, because more often than not, this can be viewed as a red herring to control the population. I think it's Benjamin Franklin said that those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Like the Nazi Germany. What did Nazi Germany tell you? During the Second World War, what did Nazi Germany tell its population? It says, stay indoors for your safety. Now, what we see around the world, we have a situation of a global fascist version of Nazi Germany using a virus which is less deadly than what many people tell us. I'll give you practical examples here. In Singapore, sitting or standing too near another person is punishable by fines up to 6 months and fines up to $7,000. In Tunisia, you've got remotely controlled robots enforcing lockdown and demanding to see people's travel permits. In Greece, the Orthodox bishop Seraphim Stergioulis was arrested for keeping his congregation open for worship. In Britain, police have set up what they describe as online forums so people can snitch or spy on neighbors who violate lockdown orders. I mean, I go to the beach because I stay near the beach. I stay in the south. I'm at my parents' house. I travel, but I stay on the south coast. I came to visit my parents who are elderly. I broke the lockdown regulations, but I'm an attorney. I go to the beach, which is by my place. You can get arrested for that. Even though I'm not of harm or danger to anybody, I'm in the outside nature, I can be arrested for that. And police have come to see me. I've asked them why. In Paris, police have banned outdoor exercise during daytime hours. The Danish parliament has passed a law authorizing the government to test, quarantine, and vaccinate citizens without their consent. So, what happens? When you tell people to shut down, when you tell people to basically stay indoors, close the windows, keep away from the sunlight, do not have any interaction with nature, which is Allah. Allah basically asks you. You know, Allah speaks about the Quran, about Islam. Islam is described as deen al-fitra, the natural way. When you're away from nature, which is your natural habitat, you're away from nature. We're not talking about going to shopping malls and all that kind of rubbish or cinemas. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about nature, going out in nature, being part of nature, going on a hike, going to the countryside, going to the mountains, going on the beach, in the ocean, alone, even on your own, or with your family. When you stay away from that, what happens? You're told to stay behind shut doors, closed doors. You basically have a situation where your immune system weakens. Any doctor will tell you this. I'm not a medical expert. I'm not giving medical advice, but this is not medical advice. This is essentially common sense. So those Muslims out there who have cited the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about quarantine, at no stage did the Prophet ﷺ shut down or tell people to stay indoors. They told people to stay away from the cities or not move out of the town where a plague occurs, but don't basically shut down people as prisoners. What you see here is a form of mass house arrest, and the excuse of a virus is used by government to impose its draconian rule. This is totally and utterly unprecedented in history. We've never had a situation in history where people have been globally shut down and the economy shut down because of a virus which affects 1% of the population. Never. It's never been done. And we as Muslims need to be speaking out against this. And of course, we can do this by presenting a positive spin on what is happening, by staying away from the negativity and the negative hogwash that the mainstream media and government is in fact imposing on us and keeping people. People are being depressed in Ramadan. Ramadan is supposed to be a month of spiritual high. You need to be positive. You need to stand up. I mean, I still take my Quran and read it on the beachfront, and I'd like the police to come and approach me and tell me to go away. You need to be positive in this month, not to be kept down. But what happens when people are just being told to keep behind closed doors, stay behind closed doors? There's a virus out there. It's going to kill you. What's going to happen? You're going to destroy the mindset and the psychological framework and makeup of the individual. And those doctors and governments who are doing that for and on behalf of government, and those religious leaders as well, need to be called out. So, bearing in mind, we're not calling for irresponsible behavior. I'm not calling for people to go and rock up at rock concerts or go to the cinemas or go and accumulate at shopping malls and entertainment places. I'm saying go and live your natural state, which is what Islam tells you to do. Islam tells you, I mean, if you feel okay, you want to close the mosque, fine. Maybe pray outdoors. The entire world is a mosque. The world belongs to Allah. The world does not belong to the government, to a politician, or to the police, or to the military. The world belongs to Allah. Allah tells you that you migrate. If you've been oppressed, you migrate, you move on. So draconianism is what we need. And I'm going to now share with you quickly, and I understand, you are ahead of us. Our suhoor is shortly, but I don't have a problem delaying breaking my fast. I have absolutely no problem with that. I would like to share because this information is extremely critical and important. And I want to share what leading medical experts have pointed out on the specific issue, which should give us some sort of hope and positive hope. This is an open letter by Professor Susharit Bhakti. He states that in the letter he pointed out that the deaths from pre-existing diseases, in many instances, are being misattributed to COVID-19, and why the response, which he calls absurd, grotesque, and dangerous, will be far more destructive than the illnesses. than the illness. He says all these measures are leading to destruction and collective suicide because of nothing but the spook. Imagine that there's a misdiagnosis, there's an inflation of figures. There are individuals that are willing to destroy their countries on the basis of a virus which hasn't been isolated, but purportedly affects less than 1% of the population. Most are asymptomatic. Few people, the elderly, may possibly die. A lot have pre-existing diseases. And then you want to shut down the healthy and the youth and children who are shown to can develop herd immunity. I've got another professor, Stanford professor, John Ioannidis, and these are experts. I'm just simply presenting the information. He had an interview with CNN. He stated that COVID is a widespread, according to him, and mild disease comparable to the influenza for the general population, whilst patients in nursing homes and hospitals should receive extra protection. But it's not anything like of the nature of a Black Plague or the Spanish flu of 1918. Nothing along that particular level. Stanford professor Scott Atlas explained in an interview with CNN that the idea of having to stop COVID-19 has created a catastrophic healthcare situation. He goes on to say that the disease is generally mild and that irrational fears have been created. He adds that there is absolutely no reason for extensive testing in the general population, which is only necessary in hospitals and nursing homes. We go on. This is an epidemiologist, Dr. Knut Witkowski, and he's an academic from Rockefeller University, formerly from Rockefeller University. He's an epidemiologist. He studies epidemics. And his interview can be found on YouTube. You can type it up. Those who are listening, type in Knut Witkowski. He explains that the danger of COVID-19, this ghost called COVID-19, is comparable to an influenza, and that the peak has already passed in most countries before the lockdown. He said the lockdown of entire societies was a catastrophic decision without benefit, but causing enormous damage. The most important measure is the protection of nursing homes. You protect the elderly, you protect the weak, you protect the immunocompromised, those with HIV/AIDS, protect them. That's what Islam teaches you. According to Witkowski, Bill Gates' statements on COVID-19 are absurd because what did he say? Gates said that the lockdown must end only once everybody has mandatory vaccination. But here's the thing, 1.37 million people have recovered. They've recovered without vaccinations. According to the official stats, they've recovered without vaccination. And Dr. Witkowski considers a vaccination against COVID-19 not necessary, and the influential COVID-19 model of British epidemiologist Neil Ferguson. Neil Ferguson came up with what we would call the Imperial College model, complete failure. And I'll just show you later on. This is a man, Neil Ferguson. He proposed an Imperial College model, which was a model that everybody stays shut down. And during this lockdown, he was exposed this week by newspapers in England called The Guardian and the Daily Telegraph and the Mirror of having had an affair with a married lover. During the lockdown, which he proposed for British society, he had his married lover come to him on multiple occasions. And South African government, and I'm sure many other governments have borrowed from the Imperial College model, we are following a model of an individual that did not even follow that specific model that he proposed. What kind of hypocrisy is this? What kind of hypocrisy is this? You've got German virologist Hendrik Streeck. He explains the final results of his pioneering antibody study. He stated that COVID-19 lethality, that's a death rate of 0.6%, 36%, but 0.36%, but explains that this is an upper limit. And the lethality is probably in the range of 0.24 or 0.26 or even below. The average age of test positive deceased was approximately 81 years old. Average of those dying, average. Like Italy, you've got an older population. South Africa, you've got a younger population. We've got 180 somewhat deaths as of today since the outbreak happened. The biology professor, Nobel Prize winner Michael Levitt, who has been analyzing the spread of COVID-19 since February, he describes the general lockdown as a huge mistake. And I urge you to type in Michael Levitt on YouTube. You can see his lengthy 1-hour interview. He calls for more targeted measures, especially to protect the risk groups. And this is what Islam teaches us. Protect those that are old, protect the immunocompromised, protect those who are weak, protect those who are sickly. But what about those who are healthy? What about those who are fit? I mean, I'm asthmatic, but I still run. I mean, I control my asthma. I'm not fearful of this, but I'm now mandated to wear a mask and a shield when I go to court because I may be viewed. Let me tell you one example. Let me give you an example how bizarre it's become. I can give you my practical example. I work for the Justice Center, Legal Aid South Africa. We now divided into two groups. My group cannot see the other group. I can't see my colleagues. Why? Because I may risk infecting them. But here's the problem. If I need to give them anything, I need to give it to another person, a prosecutor, and he needs to go and give it to them. But here's the problem. If they're so scared about infection, I could technically then give it to the prosecutor and he could share it to them. So how ludicrous and bizarre is this? How ludicrous and bizarre that in dealing with a medical crisis in South Africa, and I can speak for South Africa, you have an army, soldiers with guns pointing arms against you to protect you. And if you walk along in a beach, not affecting anybody, people can basically be arrested. And they put in a cell which is congested with a lot of people where the infection rate is high. This doesn't make sense. Are we getting information from people like Bill Gates, a man who is basically involved in software development? He's being interviewed. I don't go into the conspiracy theories, which is we need to stay away from that. But he's basically talking about mandatory vaccinations. A man who's no background in epidemiology, no background in molecular biology, no background in medicine, no background in expertise in any form of medical expertise in cell biology or anything along that line. And he's giving you advice on what to do for a virus. The man couldn't stop viruses in Microsoft. Every single Microsoft package. He was a computer software developer, a dropout from university, never completed his studies at university, but developed the computer which I'm using now, at least the software we're using, Microsoft Word, Microsoft itself. He couldn't stop viruses there. You want to stop viruses in the world? Doesn't make sense. The world has gone mad. We need to be speaking out against this. I've got a Swiss physician, the Pietro Vernazza. He explains in an interview, which can also be found online. Check the interview. These are legitimate individuals. That's why I've stayed away from all these quacks and conspiracy theories. We just deal with proper professional experts. He stated that COVID-19 is a mild disease for the vast majority of people. The counting of infected people and the call for more tests would not help. In addition, most of the people listed in the corona statistics did not die solely from COVID-19. According to Dr. Vernazza, there is no evidence for the benefit of face masks in people who do not show symptoms themselves. Because here's the thing. If a virus is so small, it can penetrate. I don't have my face mask in my car, but a virus can penetrate a face mask. Face masks maybe help you from spitting out droplets to others, but viruses can still enter. And you're breathing in carbon dioxide. And if you are infected, you're breathing in your own particular germs. So keep away from people if you wish. But a lot of medical experts are questioning the rationale behind a lot of the provisions that are being put forth. Here's the rate of deaths in England. And as you can see, there's a decline as of now. But the infection rate was most highest on the 9th of April when the lockdown was in place, not less. We've got the mortality rate in the range in new statistical data in April shows that in mid-April, about 12,000 additional cases were reported, 9,000 related to COVID, but about 3,000 were not related to COVID. So why were they then on the statistics? Why? Why were they on the statistics? And presently, you've got the Association of British Pathologists who have called for a review into the causes of death. Because what's happening is that a lot of hospitals in the United States, for example, are being paid, medical aids and schemes are being paid to register patients as being dying of COVID-19 or with COVID-19, but they now added on the statistics. And I think we need to basically challenge these facts and figures. Boris Johnson's powerful aide, that was the individual that recommended, one of the individuals recommended the lockdown. I'm giving the UK as an example. It was recommended not by a scientific commission, but by a single government advisor. This individual was a person by the name of Dominic Cummings. He was an observer, and he purportedly gave specialized advice to ministers responding to the pandemic. Now, here's a chap I've got. This guy with this woman. This lady is married not to him, to someone else. Neil Ferguson was one of the individuals that came up with what we call the Imperial College model. And according to the Imperial College model, certain, strict rules and regulations were imposed for strict social distancing, and the government utilized what was called the Imperial College model. And many governments throughout the world have borrowed this. That's why I'm saying that when people look at the hadith and saying that the shutdown or lockdown is similar to what the Prophet ﷺ stated, they're wrong. It's not. Because when the Prophet, peace be upon him, spoke about quarantine or staying away from entering a city, he wasn't talking about the lockdown that you see in different parts of the world which are destroying the economies. So let's not make that mistake. This man, Neil Ferguson, was a man that during the lockdown, which he basically proposed, called his married lover to visit him on multiple occasions. Now, imagine that you are using the model of a man who himself does not believe in that model. Himself, he doesn't believe in that model because he had his own lover coming to see him. And what happened this week? He resigned. The so-called government scientist resigned. So these are the kind of technocrats, the so-called magicians. You had magicians in the time of Fir'aun, as you see in Surah Taha. I'll come to that shortly. These technocrats and these scientists are the so-called magicians of our time, which we, following the example of Musa alayhi salam, need to expose on a basis, on a daily and regular basis. Peter Hitchens, who's a broadcaster, made this telling point. He says, "We are destroying the nation's wealth and health. If you don't defend the most basic freedom, the one to go lawfully where you wish, when you wish, then you will lose it forever. And that is not all you will lose. Look at the censorship of the internet, spreading like a great dark blot, the death of parliament, the conversion of the police into a state militia. And this is happening all around the world." We had two noted medical experts, doctors, physicians, who conducted 5,000 tests on COVID-19 in the United States. Dr. Erickson, and he made his YouTube video went viral, and he gave a view and a position which was contrary to that of government, which spoke out against a lockdown, spoke out against, for example, speaking for maintaining hygiene, maintaining safe standards, being cautious, helping the poor, the old, the elderly, the sick, the immunocompromised, but being normal in society, not shutting society down completely. Now, what happened to him? His YouTube video was removed. You've got other individuals. I mean, there's a chap, I don't think he's too credible, Dr. Rashid Battar, Dr. Judy Mikowitz. You've got the conspiracy theorist, David Icke. He's a conspiracy theorist. His video was removed. His YouTube channel was shut down. We've got censorship taking place en masse. And the question we need to ask is why? Why, if people are basically medical experts, they are being censored? Why are doctors being censored? But people like Bill Gates, for example, are allowed to speak openly. If you, for example, see no problem in Bill Gates being allowed to speak, but medical experts being censored on YouTube, and you see no problem with that, then you are part of the problem. Then you are significantly part of the problem. We need to be confronting the Fir'auns of our time and the magicians of our time that are basically pulling the wool before our eyes and creating a society. Now, what does Islam say about this? Islamic law and experts within the Islamic worldview have dealt with epidemics, and there have been worse epidemics. Worse, the Spanish flu of 1918 was worse than this. The Black Plague is the worst we've ever seen, and it happened during the time of the Ottomans. There were plagues that happened. But going back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, how can people help cope with the COVID-19? Islamic rules over epidemics to protect people from death go back to the very early stage. On many occasions, the Prophet Muhammad advised his companions to value their lives as the utmost importance over death. Numerous hadith. He urged people to stay away where there were clearly epidemics, but not to shut down yourselves completely. He says, when you hear of a plague in a land, do not go to it. And if it occurs that you are already in, then do not leave or flee away from it. Do not run away from it, because there's a possibility that you can basically, spread it to others. But did he shut down economy? Did he say that people could not interact with each other, obviously maintaining safe space? Did he shut down the masajid? Did that ever happen in society? Not that I've seen, not that I can see any kind of historical precedent for that. Um, there were instances, for example, when the issue of shaking hands. Okay, you want to split hairs about shaking hands. He was to make an agreement with one of the delegations who came. He refused to shake hands with one of the people who had a contagious disease, and he sent him back to where he came from. This was a comment made, which I found from Hussein Ari, who's an expert in the High Council of Turkish. He's the director of religious affairs. I've read about him. I don't know him personally. You brothers may possibly know him, which is something which could possibly look at. There was something in the time of the Khalif Umar, when one of the Muslim armies approached a location in Syria in the old Levant. Khalif Umar urged the army commander to retreat from the expedition in the face of a plague, but the order wasn't fulfilled wholeheartedly. He personally moved to a location to meet with the commander to discuss the situation. When the disagreement continued, he consulted with a diverse range of advisors to reach an ultimate decision. Now, here's the point. What do we learn from this? The Khalif Umar consulted with advisors within the Ummah in general. Do we have a situation of that today? Do we have any kind of situation similar to that? None whatsoever. These technocrats and these government leaders and agents that are basically telling us what to do, none of them are basically consulting us when they're shutting us away. One of the commanders, Abu Ubaida ibn Jarrah, the commander of the army and one of Umar's best friends who passed away from the plague, asked Umar, "Are you fleeing away from the decree of Allah?" And his response was, yes, we are fleeing from the decree of Allah to the decree of Allah. So in other words, Allah tells you to exercise caution. The Prophet ﷺ tells you to exercise caution, but not to engage in extreme conduct, which can have a greater consequential destruction of communities and society that you see around us. Not to the extent where you see an Orwellian police state being imposed on the population. More often than not, you have a situation if government was so careful or cautious or concerned about society, why is it that they have to shoot people dead, as we see in South Africa, to keep people away? Is this what Islam teaches us? Why do we have to lock people away and put them in congested cells of close to 100 people in one time to protect them from a virus? Does that make sense? We have people that are poor, that cannot basically earn a decent living. They do not have money to feed their families. What happens? They cannot go and work. They cannot earn an income. They cannot basically leave their houses. Are we destroying society on the basis of a virus where we can protect people, engage in good medical advice? These are medical experts. I've given you medical experts. These are medical experts that people are not listening to. We are listening to what government is telling us and not what the expert says. When the Quran tells you when you need anything, who do you go? Ask the experts. Look at what the experts are doing. Look at what governments are doing. They are destroying us and telling us to stay behind and shutting down the economies. The consequential effect of the death that will result as a result of a shutdown will be far in excess of anything that COVID-19 basically will cause. Right now, we've got about 293,000 or 200,000 deaths globally. But look at the deaths for flu. In my country, I pointed out that there was a pandemic last year of TB, which is not viewed as a pandemic, tuberculosis. 63,000 people died. The majority of them were poor. No pandemic. Poverty kills the vast majority of people in Africa. Millions of people die. And it's not viewed as a pandemic. And it is a pandemic. People die of lack of nutrition, hunger, poverty, starvation. In Iraq, you've got depleted uranium bombing society, bombing people, destroying millions of lives, and those lives are worth it. Why is it that there is such a global outbreak? Why is it that there's such panic caused by COVID-19? You know why? You know why? It's because besides China, the very first people that it affected purportedly was Western Europe. It affected the upper to middle class individuals. It affected those politicians and leaders that were basically susceptible to it. If this was a poor man's illness, for the sake of argument, if this was an illness that just affected those in Africa, or those in the middle of Africa, or those in the Sahara Desert, or those poor countries like Afghanistan or Syria, what would have happened? People would be left to die. There would be no lockdown, no calling for any shutdown, nothing along that line. So I think as Muslims, we need to be cautious. I want to draw for your attention and bring this to a close because we have to break to our suhoor. But like I said, I'm willing to share more time. If you look at Surah Taha, and I give you the example because I discussed this with an alim a few days ago. In Surah Taha, and you can see the adhan in the background. We're going to break our fast, but I just want to share this with you. In Surah Taha, verse 65, 63, it says, they said these two are sorcerers who wish to expel you from your land with their sorcery and to do away with your exemplary life. So gather your plot and come in ranks. They said, "O Moses, either you cast or we shall be the first to cast," meaning the stone, the sticks. He said, "Then you cast." Then behold, their ropes and their staffs appeared to him through their sorcery to move swiftly, whereas Moses saw a fear in his soul. He said, "Fear not, truly you are uppermost. Cast that which is in our right hand." Allah said, we said, "Fear not, you are uppermost. Cast which is in your right hand. It will devour and eat up what they have produced. They have produced only a sorcerer's trick, and the sorcerers not prosper wherever they may go." The sorcerers were cast down out of shock and frustration. What did they say? "We believe in the Lord of Harun alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam." Because when Moses cast his staff, all their deception. The sticks, which was transformed into snakes, was a deception. And whatever they did was shown to be false. And Musa made a similar statement about the ultimate futility of the work of the sorcerers. After the sorcerers were defeated, they turned their back humbled and they turned in submission to Allah. And what we see around us is sorcerers and magicians and modern day technocrats that are basically controlling our lives, ruling our lives, telling us what to do, and controlling society. Society needs to be responsible. I'm not a medical expert, but I think we need to maintain a responsible, moderate position in terms of how we deal with the virus, which has not yet been isolated. Most of the medical experts state maintain rationality, maintain reasonableness, help those who are elderly, help those who are poor, help those who are sick, and those who are immunocompromised. But for the rest of society, we need to maintain responsibility in terms of how we interact with each other. And what we see in terms of the lockdowns globally are nothing more than Orwellian society trying to dictate and control us. So this is, in a nutshell, some of my views and positions that I've put forth. I think that this is a reasonable approach that I've adopted. I have stayed away from bizarre conspiracy theories and so on. We need to basically be rational in terms of our approach, and we need a Quran-centric response. You know, those who are unfortunately in lockdown, living in a military state, this could be a means in terms of which you could get back to studying the Quran, understanding the Quran, going back to what we see that is mentioned in the Quran, going to the experts, studying, making yourself empowered in terms of what you see around yourself. Because an empowered mind is a mind that is truly liberated and free. A mind that is not empowered will listen to what people are telling them and will live in a state of pessimism. So in this time of Ramadan, we need to be optimistic. We need to be optimistic, and I hope, inshallah, that the views that I presented was optimistic. We need to be not cowed down in fear, and we need to be positive. Allah states that for every illness, He has a cure. Not a vaccine. For every illness out there, He has a cure. And if we have yaqeen, believe in that, then most certainly we are able to overcome this ailment and certainly the kind of fascism that we're seeing being imposed in society. So, Jazakallah khair. I have to break fast, but just for the time being, if there's any questions that you may have or suggestions, I'm free to open. I'm free to continue the discussion at a limited scale. Jazakallah khair wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Yes, brother, I'm here. People heard me?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ustaz Yusuf. Jazakumullah khairan. If you have any questions we can take the questions from the participants, and then we will finish, inshallah, our program.
Okay. our fast has broken, but I'm willing to take a few questions. I just want to. I've just got some water. If I may just break my fast with water. I'm just going to recite dua before the questions come, so I can break my fast. Allahumma laka sumtu wa bika amantu wa alayka tawakkaltu wa ala rizqika ghaftartu. Allah, I have fasted for you. Accept this fast. Let me fulfill the rest of the fast for the month of Ramadan, and inshallah, protect us from any form of ailments, all forms of calamities, but more particularly the calamities of the Fir'auns of our time and the oppression and zulm that we see around us.
تقبل الله أستاذ الكريم.
So I've just broken my fast and I'm free to have a few questions, and then I'll make my Maghrib Salah, and then we'll just continue for the short few minutes that we have. I'll take a few questions.
Yeah, Brother Fatih asking from chat, if this is Qadar, Corona, do we have before big musibah for all people of the world? Because we know that musibahs come to on tribes, specifically tribes. He's writing this.
Sorry, is the question does this Corona affect specific tribes? Is that the question? I didn't get the question. Could you be more clear on the question?
Brother,
maybe Fatih could Fatih not enter the chat? Maybe Fatih could enter the chat and speak.
Brother Fatih, you can you talk? Can you ask your question directly?
I can ask here. So
sure.
Through the Quran, mostly we know that the musibats, like the disease, came specific tribes.
Yeah.
What kind of, let's say, memories or stories we have in the Quran that they affect like all humanity, like the Noah's the flood, the big disaster, because this Corona seems that came to affect all humanity.
Well, that's a question. I, for one, do not believe that this is a punishment or a curse from Allah to affect humanity at large. This is not on the same scale as, for example, in the time of Egypt. When you had the plagues in Egypt that was imposed on the Egyptian population, it never affected the Bani Israel or Musa alayhi salam, but it affected the Egyptians. During the time of Nuh alayhi salam, you had a flood, but the flood was not global. The flood affected just those who rejected him or disbelieved him. So I do not, for one, believe that everything happens by the will of Allah and by the decree of Allah. But I believe that you do not have something on a global scale or a pandemic on the scale that you see of, for example, the Black Plague or the Spanish flu of 1918. There are many questions about the origins of the flu. Some state that this particular pandemic originated in a laboratory in Wuhan, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I don't have enough information to make a positive case on that specific issue. Some medical experts, like, for example, Dr. Anthony Kaufman, suggested that the virus itself hasn't been isolated, and when people test for something, they test for genetic fluid from an RNA, which is an exosome, which cannot be identified with the virus per se. So there's no clear-cut information, but the general consensus amongst the scientific community is that there seems to be some sort of very contagious influenza, but it's mild in a general sense. It's not deadly. People don't die. I mean, like the Ebola virus, or, for example, like the Spanish flu or the Black Plague that afflicted whole communities and societies. You don't have something of that particular nature. So I don't, for one, believe that this is punishment from Allah. Whether man-made or bio-warfare, that's a possibility. It could possibly be some sort of bio-warfare. But the other argument is that if it is biological warfare, why would they release it, knowing full well that it could affect their own very people? You see, if someone wants to create biological warfare and release it in society, like they did in Iraq, they've done depleted uranium, ensure that it didn't affect them. But if you have a situation where a virus is released through means of biological agents, then there's a possibility it can affect you yourself. So there's ifs and buts about that. But the general sense and consensus is that most of these scientists seem to suggest that you got a widespread disease comparable to maybe a severe form of influenza that may be contagious. But the majority of people that get it are asymptomatic. But we need to be cautious with the facts and figures because governments, in particular, are found to be lying to us about the figures, about the statistics, and about the data that is in fact given. So I, for one, do not believe that this is a punishment by Allah, punishing the whole of humanity. I mean, this was the argument made in November, December, that Allah is punishing the Chinese people for what the Chinese government is doing to the Uyghurs. But why would he punish the Chinese people? I mean, why would he punish the Chinese people? The Chinese people didn't do anything. It's the Chinese government that was oppressing the Uyghurs or the Muslims in China. So you can see the argument can be made multiple. So we shouldn't think for what Allah thinks. We don't know. Allah, we're not Allah. We don't know what is in Allah's being in terms of decision making. So for those who are making these extreme self-righteous claims, I think it's more moderate to take a more balanced approach, see what the situation is, look at the circumstantial evidence, and where found wanting, call out government for giving out false information. What we can see and what we are clear about is that we see a global fascist version of Nazi Germany enveloping us in all forms and in all societies, the so-called Big Brother society, monitoring people, monitoring where we go, monitoring who can work, who cannot work, how we can leave our houses, what we do, where we can travel, and so on. And I think that's of greater concern in society. So I hope that answers your question, brother.
Yes, Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, brother Fadi. Is there another question
Any other questions?
we can take, or we will finish the program, inshallah?
Inshallah.
We get tired. Thank you very much.
Let me take a last question, and then I need to make my maghrib. Let me take a last question, if there is.
From the participants, do you have any question? You can write from chat, or we can open your microphone.
If you have a question, I'm willing to take your question as well. Nothing?
I think no one is asking.
Okay. Well, what I want to do in the closing, brother, I just want to say is the information I gave you, I can share this PowerPoint with Brother Fatih and give you some of the points. I would urge people to read the Quran and empower yourself with the information out there. Don't necessarily go to the news media with negativity. It's going to poison your mind. There's a lot of people out there that are giving a positive perspective that, look, we need to remain positive. We need to remain hopeful. We can get through this. Islam teaches us. Islam teaches us to liberate ourselves. What you see around you is zulm. What you see around you is oppression. In Surah 4, verse 75, Allah says, why will you not fight for those who say, our Lord, liberate us from a community and from a person who is imposing tyranny upon us? We are, and this is the intellectual jihad that we need to basically wage. The intellectual jihad is to make people aware of what is happening in society, of what people are doing to us. And of course, not being feared, not being fearful. If Allah says that there is a cure for every ailment, there's definitely a cure for every ailment. We've never seen a situation in history. This will be unprecedented. And our children and our grandchildren and our great-great-great-grandchildren, if we are alive to see them, will one day ask us, what did you do when your governments and when your Fir'auns and when your oppressive leaders shut you down in closed doors, stopped people from working, and destroyed the lives of millions of people? What did you do? And what answer will we give to them in the generations that are coming? So I hope this discussion opened our minds somewhat. It was different from the conventional framework of dawah, but I think it's important that we focus on these issues and contemporaneously deal with some of the situations that we see in society, because this is something that affects all of us. And if we as Muslims are seen to be doing something positive for the whole of humanity, then people will look at us and certainly see Islam as a guiding light of liberation, the deen al-fitra, the natural way that humanity needs to turn towards. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much, Ustaz Al-Karim. If you, someone was asking from you to the PowerPoint slides, if you can share with us and they will contact with us, we can send to them, inshallah.
Sure. What I will do is give me your email, and once we're done, I will certainly forward the PowerPoint to you.
Yeah, we will take from you, and if the participants when the participants ask from us, we will deliver to you. Inshallah, we will deliver to them. Inshallah.
Inshallah. And
Thank you very much.
share this information, share this video as widely as possible.